Picture this, a little guy with a tiny mustache, a bowler hat perched on his head, twirling a bamboo cane like it's a magic wand, waddling along like a duck who's late for dinner. Who else could it be but Charlie Chaplin, the king of silent comedy who made the world laugh without saying a single word? Born on April 16, 1889, in the grimy streets of London, this pint-sized dreamer clawed his way from rags to riches, becoming a global icon of the silver screen. That mustache, can you believe it, sparked a worldwide craze? But behind the giggles and gags lies a story juicier than a Hollywood scandal. From poverty to stardom, love to heartbreak, and even exile, Chaplin's life was a roller coaster of chaos and triumph. Welcome to Hollywood Mysteries on Wheel History, where we're diving into his wild ride, a quest for freedom and identity that'll leave you laughing, crying, and maybe even waddling a little yourself, ready to step into Chaplin's world. Let's roll. Let's rewind to 1889, where a scrawny baby named Charles Spencer Chaplin entered the world on a gritty London street, probably to the tune of a distant pub song. Born April 16th, in a Walworth flat that smelled more of damp than dreams, Charlie was the son of music hall performers Hannah Chaplin, stage name Lily Harley, and Charles Chaplin Sr. Picture their home, a shoebox of a place, walls thin as gossip, where the clink of coins was rarer than a sunny day. According to the Chaplin estate, the family's life was a tightrope walk over poverty's jaws. Hannah's voice, described by a local paper as a melody to melt the coldest heart, was their ticket to survival, but it wasn't enough. "We were always one bad night from starvation," Charlie later wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. His parents' marriage, a flop worse than a rainy music hall matinee. Charles Sr., a crooner with a velvet voice, preferred whiskey to family, splitting from Hannah when Charlie was barely out of diapers. "My father's love was for the bottle, not us," Charlie recalled in a 1920s photoplay chat. By 1891, Hannah was raising Charlie and his older brother, Sidney, born 4 years earlier to another man, on her own. Sidney, with his quick wit and protective streak, was Charlie's first audience and best friend. "Sidney taught me to laugh when the world felt heavy," Charlie told The Guardian in the 1930s. There was also a younger half-brother, George Wheeler Dryden, but he was whisked away by his father, leaving a gap in the family photo. Hannah was the heart of the clan, a woman whose warmth could light up a room, until it didn't. Her mental health, battered by stress and poverty, started to fray, a shadow that loomed over Charlie's earliest memories. "Mother's smile was my anchor," he wrote in My Autobiography, "but when it faded, I felt adrift. The music halls where she performed were the pulse of Victorian London, rowdy escapes for the working class, but the pay was a pittance." A fellow performer, per biography.com, called Hannah a star who never got her spotlight. Charles Sr.'s death in 1901 from cirrhosis, at just 38, barely rippled their lives. He'd been gone so long. His funeral felt like a stranger's, Charlie admitted to the Times in 1950. This wasn't just a family, it was a masterclass in grit. London's slums, with their coal-stained air and crowded tenements, shaped their every move. Charlie learned early to dodge debt collectors and charm neighbors for a crust of bread. His cousin Aubrey once said, "Charlie could mimic a landlord's scowl so perfectly, you'd swear he was born for the stage." That knack for comedy? It was born in the chaos of a broken home, where a laugh could fend off despair. Can you imagine a kid turning hunger into humor? That's Charlie, folks, a tiny rebel with a heart too big for his patched-up shoes. Want to dig into the roots of his genius? Join our Patreon for exclusive Chaplin family stories. Let's zoom into the world of a young Charlie Chaplin, a scrappy kid dodging life's punches in 1890s London like a pint-sized prizefighter. By age 7, he was thrust into the Lambeth workhouse, a place so bleak it made a rainy Monday look cheerful. Picture a fortress of gray stone, where kids in scratchy uniforms slurped watery gruel under the glare of stern overseers. According to PBS American Masters, The workhouse was a soul-sucking maze of rules and hunger, yet Charlie found a way to spark joy. I'd mimic the warden's pompous strut to make the other boys laugh, he recalled in a 1930s interview with the New York Times. That's the thing about Charlie. His spirit was like a candle in a storm, flickering but never out. The workhouse wasn't just a hardship, it was a crucible. Stripped of comfort, Charlie learned to read people's faces, when to charm, when to hide. Poverty taught me to see the world's masks, he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. At 9, he escaped to the stage, joining the 8 Lancashire Lads, a clog-dancing troupe that toured England's smoky theaters. Imagine him, a twig of a boy in oversized boots, clattering across splintered boards with a grin that could outshine the gaslights. I danced like my life depended on it, he told Variety in 1915, because sometimes it did. Those performances weren't just gigs, they were his rebellion against despair, each step a middle finger to fate. London's underbelly left its mark, too. The city's street hawkers, with their sing-song pitches, and the drunkards' slurred ballads were his first comedy lessons. The streets were my script, he said in a 1940s BBC chat. Every shout, every stumble was a scene. These early years planted a seed, a hunger to connect, to make people feel seen. As biographer Peter Ackroyd notes in Charlie Chaplin, A Brief Life, his empathy for the forgotten came from being one of them. But it wasn't all rosy. The constant hustle left him with annoying fear of being invisible. I wanted to be remembered, he admitted to The Guardian in 1928, even if just for a laugh. Charlie's knack for turning pain into play was pure magic. A friend from the troupe, perbiography.com, said he'd trip over nothing and make it a performance. That ability to find humor in hardship wasn't just survival, it was genius in the making. The workhouse, the stage, the streets, they were his teachers, each one sharpening his instinct for timing and heart. Can you picture it? A kid who could make a crowd roar while his stomach growled? That's Charlie, folks, a spark in the dark, ready to light up the world. Want to feel the pulse of his early days? Check out our exclusive workhouse photos on Instagram and share your thoughts. Step into London at the dawn of the 20th century, where young Charlie Chaplin, now a lanky teenager, navigated a city that was equal parts circus and sewer. Think gaslit streets buzzing with costermongers hawking apples, horse carts clattering over cobblestones, and the ever-present smog that clung like a bad mood. According to PBS American Masters, this was a London of dizzying contrasts. Glittering West End theaters rubbed shoulders with East End slums. For a kid like Charlie, growing up in Kennington's gritty maze, it was a masterclass in hustle. The city was a stage, and I was itching to play my part, he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. The music halls were London's beating heart, and Charlie soaked them up like a sponge. These rowdy venues, think the Tivoli or the Canterbury, were the TikTok of the 1900s, serving up comedy, songs, and melodrama to raucous crowds. He'd sneak into the cheap seats, studying legends like Don Lino, whose slapstick left audiences gasping, or Marie Lloyd, whose cheeky winks could charm a statue. I learned more from a music hall crowd than any school, Charlie told the Times in 1950. Those performers taught him the alchemy of timing, when to pause, when to pratfall. At 14, he scored his first real gig, playing a newsboy in a touring production of Sherlock Holmes. I was a nobody, but I felt like a king, he recalled in a 1925 New York Times interview. Everything changed at 19, when Charlie caught the eye of Fred Karno, the godfather of British vaudeville. Karno's comedy troupe was the big leagues, churning out sketches that packed theaters from London to Leeds. Charlie's knack for mimicry, honed from years of watching street buskers and pub drunks, made him a standout. He could steal a scene with a single glance, Karno later said, per IMDb. Charlie rose from bit player to star, headlining sketches like Mumming Birds. Karno gave me a spotlight, and I ran with it. He told Variety in 1930, the troupe's grueling schedule, 6 shows a day, sometimes, was his boot camp, sharpening his instincts for physical comedy. London's energy fueled Charlie's ambition, but it also showed him the world's sharp edges. The city's class divide was stark. Champagne flowed in Mayfair while Kennington kids begged for scraps. That contrast stuck with him, planting a quiet fire to rise above his roots. "I saw the rich and the ragged, and I wanted to speak for the latter," he said in a 1940s BBC interview. Carnot's troupe was his ticket out, and in 1910, it set sail for America, a move that felt like stepping into a new script. Can you imagine the buzz? A London lad, barely 21, ready to take on the world. Curious about where this journey led? Subscribe to Wheel History on YouTube and join us for the next act. Picture Charlie Chaplin in 1910, a 21-year-old Londoner with a suitcase full of dreams and a knack for falling on his face on purpose. He just stepped off a boat in New York with Fred Carnot's comedy troupe, a gang of British vaudevillians ready to charm America's theater crowds. The U.S. was a whirlwind of opportunity, skyscrapers piercing the sky, ragtime tunes spilling from saloons, and a budding film industry in its diaper days. According to Britannica, this was the dawn of the Nickelodeon era, when folks paid a nickel to watch flickering reels in smoky rooms. Charlie, fresh from England's music halls, was about to dive headfirst into this new world. America felt like a blank canvas. He wrote in his 1964 book, my autobiography. I was ready to paint it with laughs. Carnot's troupe was a hit, touring from coast to coast with slapstick sketches that left audiences howling. Charlie's star turn in a night in an English music hall showcased his gift for physical comedy. Think pratfalls and eyebrow wiggles that could steal a scene. I learned to make every stumble a story, he told Variety in 1915. But the grind was brutal. Multiple shows daily, cheap boarding houses, and the constant hustle of keeping crowds happy. Still, Charlie's charm caught eyes, especially that of Mack Sennett, the kingpin of Keystone Studios, Hollywood's comedy factory. In 1913, Sennett offered him a contract at $150 a week, a fortune for a kid who'd once scrounged for pennies. I thought I'd hit the jackpot, Charlie recalled in a 1920s photoplay interview. But I was terrified I'd flop. Charlie arrived in Los Angeles, a dusty town where orange groves outnumbered studios. Keystone was a chaotic playground, churning out short comedies faster than you could say custard pie. His debut, Making a Living, hit screens on February 2, 1914, showing him as a swindling dandy in a top hat. It was fine, but not earth-shaking. I was a stranger in a strange land, he admitted to the New York Times in 1925. Then came the game changer, Kid Auto Races at Venice, released February 7, 1914. Charlie, tasked with improvising, raided the costume room and emerged as the Tramp, a scruffy little guy with a bowler hat, baggy pants, a bamboo cane, and a mustache that screamed mischief. I wanted him to be a nobody with a spark of hope, he said in a 1930s BBC interview. The Tramp's waddle and cheeky grin lit up the screen, and audiences lost it. Can you believe it? A character born from a pile of mismatched clothes became a global icon. That year was a blur of breakneck filmmaking, 35 Keystone shorts, each a crash course in comedy. Charlie learned to direct, edit, and even wrangle the camera, often clashing with Sennett's faster, louder style. Mack wanted gags. I wanted heart, he told The Guardian in 1940. Films like The Knockout and Caught in the Rain showed his growing flair, blending slapstick with pathos. Off-screen, he was a bundle of nerves, haunted by the fear of fading into obscurity. Every film felt like a gamble, he wrote in my autobiography. Would they laugh, or would I bomb? Yet, his confidence grew with every chuckle. By late 1914, he jumped to SNA Studios for $1,250 a week, a leap that screamed, I've arrived. The historical backdrop was wild. Hollywood was a newborn, with studios popping up like weeds and audiences craving fresh faces. Charlie's Tramp tapped into the era's underdog spirit, reflecting immigrants and workers chasing the American dream. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, His life and art, the Tramp was everyone's mirror. A dreamer in a cruel world. Charlie's relentless work ethic, scripting, starring, directing, set him apart in an industry still figuring itself out. "I was my own boss, even when I wasn't," he quipped to the Times in 1950. That drive, mixed with his knack for making hardship hilarious, was pure Chaplin magic. His early style, picture a peacock with a pratfall, loud suits, wild gestures, and a mustache that stole the spotlight. "My costumes were my armor," he said in a 1920s photoplay chat. The Tramp's look, part hobo, part gentleman, was a middle finger to class snobbery, and fans ate it up. Tragédie, who knew a pair of baggy pants could say so much? This was Charlie planting his flag, a kid from nowhere ready to conquer Hollywood. Want to see the Tramp's first waddle? Hunt down Kid Auto Races on YouTube and drop your thoughts in our comments. By the 1920s, Charlie Chaplin wasn't just a star. He was a supernova, lighting up cinema screens with his Tramp, that lovable hobo with a heart of gold. Hollywood was now a full-blown dream factory, with studios like MGM and Paramount churning out films for a world hungry for escape. The Roaring '20s brought jazz, flappers, and a post-war optimism, but the Great Depression loomed, making Chaplin's underdog tailies resonate deeper. According to IMDb, Chaplin had become a one-man empire, writing, directing, starring, and even composing for his films. Let's dive into 5 masterpieces from 1921 to 1940 that cemented his legend, with the gold rush as the crown jewel. "I wanted to make people laugh and cry," he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Buckle up, folks, Charlie delivered. The Kid 1921. Chaplin's first feature-length film, The Kid, dropped on January 21, 1921, a 68-minute heart-tugger that paired the Tramp with a scrappy orphan, played by 5-year-old Jackie Coogan. Picture this: the Tramp, all baggy pants and bamboo cane, adopts a foundling and raises him in a world of broken windows and nosy cops. It was a risky leap from short comedies, blending slapstick with raw emotion. "I poured my soul into it," Chaplin told Photoplay in 1921. The scene where the Kid is torn from the Tramp's arms. Pure gut punch, leaving audiences sobbing. Made for $250,000, it grossed millions, per Britannica, proving Chaplin could stretch hearts as well as laughs. The film mirrored the era's orphan crisis, with post-war poverty hitting hard. "The Tramp was every man's fight," he said in a 1930s Variety interview. Can you imagine making a comedy that breaks hearts? That's Charlie's magic. The Gold Rush 1925. If there's one Chaplin film to tattoo on your soul, it's The Gold Rush. Released June 26, 1925, the Tramp ventures into the Klondike Gold Rush, battling blizzards and hunger with nothing but his wits and a wobbly grin. The iconic dance of the rolls, where he twirls dinner rolls on forks like a ballerina, became a cultural phenomenon. "I wanted every gag to sing," Chaplin told the New York Times in 1926. Shot on a massive set with fake snow, the film cost $923,000, but raked in $5 million worldwide, per IMDb. The scene where the Tramp boils his shoe for dinner? It's hilarious and heartbreaking, reflecting the desperation of the 1890s gold rush and the 1920s economic unease. "Hunger taught me comedy," he quipped in a 1940s BBC chat. This film's mix of hope and hardship made it Chaplin's favorite. "It's the picture I want to be remembered by," he wrote in My Autobiography. Tragédie, who turns a shoe into a Michelin star meal. City Lights 1931. By 1931, talkies were taking over, but Chaplin doubled down on silent film with City Lights, released January 30th. The Tramp falls for a blind flower girl, scraping by to fund her eye surgery while dodging a drunken millionaire. Chaplin composed the score himself, a lilting melody that felt like love in notes, per The Guardian in 1931. The final scene, where the girl sees the Tramp for the first time, is cinema's gold standard, tears guaranteed. "I chased the perfect ending," Chaplin told Variety in 1932. Premiering with Albert Einstein in the audience, the film grossed for $1 million per Britannica. Against the Great Depression's gloom, it was a beacon of hope. "The Tramp gave the world a smile," Chaplin said in a 1950s Times interview. Silent in a talky world, that's Chaplin, stubborn and brilliant. Modern Times, 1936. Released February 5, 1936, Modern Times was Chaplin's love letter to the little guy crushed by industrialization. The Tramp battles factory machines and unemployment, with Paulette Goddard as his spunky sidekick. It's his first film with sound effects, think clanking gears, but still dialogue-free, a cheeky nod to his silent roots. The opening factory scene, where the Tramp's caught in giant cogs, is a visual metaphor for the era's labor struggles. Machines were eating men alive, he told the New York Times in 1937. Made for $1.5 million, it earned for $1 million per IMDb. Chaplin's song Smile, woven into the score, became an anthem of resilience. "I wanted to laugh at the chaos," he said in a 1940s BBC interview. With the Depression lingering, this was Chaplin's mic drop, comedy with a conscience. The Great Dictator, 1940. Chaplin's boldest swing, The Great Dictator, hit theaters October 5–10, 1940, as World War II raged. He plays dual roles, a Jewish barber and a Hitler-esque tyrant, Adenoid Hinkle. The film's satire, think Hinkle dancing with a globe, was a direct jab at fascism. His first full talkie, it showcased his voice, sharp and commanding. "I had to speak, or the world would suffer," he told The Guardian in 1941. The final speech, a plea for peace, stunned audiences. Costing $2 million, it grossed $5 million and earned 5 Oscar nods per IMDb. "I risked everything to say something," Chaplin wrote in my autobiography. With Nazism spreading, this was comedy as rebellion. Can you imagine mocking Hitler on screen? That's Chaplin, fearless and fierce. These films weren't just hits, they reshaped cinema. Chaplin's blend of humor and humanity spoke to a world reeling from war, poverty, and change. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, his life and art, he made the universal personal. The Tramp, especially in the gold rush, became a mirror for dreamers everywhere. "I gave the world a friend," Chaplin said in a 1950s Times interview. "Want to feel the Tramp's magic? Stream The Gold Rush on our recommended platforms and share your favorite scene in the comments." By the 1940s, Charlie Chaplin was a global titan, his Tramp waddling into hearts worldwide with films like The Gold Rush. But fame's spotlight casts long shadows, and for Chaplin, the 1940s and early 1950s were a gauntlet of professional storms that tested his grit. Hollywood was now a polished machine, but the world outside was chaos. World War II's aftermath, the Cold War's paranoia, and McCarthyism's witch hunts turned Tinseltown into a pressure cooker. According to Britannica, Chaplin's outspoken views and foreign roots made him a target in an America gripped by fear of communism. "I was a dreamer, not a conspirator," he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Let's unpack the battles he faced and how he danced through the fire, cane twirling, of course. The trouble kicked off with Monsieur Verdoux, 1947, a dark comedy about a bank clerk turned serial killer, a sharp left turn from the Tramp's whimsy. Released April 11, 1947, it was Chaplin's boldest risk yet, a satire on capitalism and war's dehumanization. Critics were split. Some hailed its genius, others clutched their pearls. "I wanted to shake the world awake," Chaplin told the New York Times in 1948, but the timing was brutal. Post-war America, reeling from economic shifts and Red Scare hysteria, wasn't in the mood for nuance. The House Un-American Activities Committee, WAC, had Hollywood in its crosshairs, sniffing out subversive artists. Chaplin, a Brit who never took U.S. citizenship, was low-hanging fruit. His vocal support for Russian war relief and liberal causes didn't help. "I spoke for peace," and they heard treason, he quipped in a 1950s Guardian interview. Then came the Joan Barry scandal, a legal soap opera that could have been a Chaplin script if it weren't so messy. In 1943, Barry, a young actress, claimed Chaplin fathered her child. The paternity suit, filed in 1944, was a tabloid frenzy, with headlines screaming scandal. Blood tests proved Chaplin wasn't the father, but the FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, pounced, slapping him with Mann Act charges for allegedly transporting Barry across state lines. It was a circus, and I was the clown, Chaplin told Variety in 1950. Acquitted in 1944, he still paid a price, legal fees, a battered reputation, and a media that painted him as a cad. The ordeal drained him, but he channeled it into his work. Pain is fuel for art, he wrote in my autobiography. Can you imagine fighting a lawsuit while the government's breathing down your neck? Tragédie, talk about a plot twist, the political heat intensified. HUAC and the FBI had files on Chaplin thicker than a phone book, branding him a communist sympathizer for films like The Great Dictator and his leftist leanings. By 1952, the U.S. government revoked his re-entry permit while he was abroad promoting Limelight, his bittersweet ballet drama released October 23, 1952. They didn't exile me, they just locked the door, he said in a 1953 Times interview. The McCarthy-era's paranoia was peak absurdity. Chaplin, whose Tramp championed the downtrodden, was now public enemy number one. Hollywood's silence stung. Too many peers distanced themselves, fearing the blacklist. Loyalty shifts like sand in this town, he told The Guardian in 1955. But Chaplin wasn't one to sulk. He pivoted, setting up shop in Europe, where audiences still adored him. Limelight, a love letter to performers, was a quiet triumph, grossing $1 million, IMDb. Its story of a fading clown mirrored his own fears of irrelevance. I put my heart on the screen, he said in a 1953 BBC interview. He founded his own distribution company, United Artists, co-created in 1919, to control his work, a middle finger to studio meddling. His next film, A King in New York 1957, shot in London, skewered American paranoia with glee. I laughed at their fear, he wrote in my autobiography. These moves weren't just survival, they were defiance, proving his voice couldn't be silenced. The historical context here is key. McCarthyism wasn't just a political purge. It was a cultural earthquake, shattering careers and sowing distrust. Chaplin's refusal to bow reflected his lifelong fight for freedom, a theme baked into his art. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, his life and art, his exile was America's loss, not his. He turned adversity into fuel, crafting films that spoke truth with a wink. The world's a stage, and I kept performing, he quipped to Variety in 1960. That resilience, part stubbornness, part genius, kept his star shining. Picture it, a man hounded by power, still twirling his cane like he owned the world. Want to dive into Chaplin's defiance? Check out Limelight on our recommended streaming platforms and tell us how it hits you in the comments. Imagine Charlie Chaplin on a film set, twirling his bamboo cane like a maestro's baton, his tiny mustache twitching as he directs a scene with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. By the height of his career, Chaplin wasn't just making movies, he was reinventing them, blending comedy, heart, and a dash of rebellion into a cocktail that changed cinema forever. The early 20th century was a wild time for film. Silent reels flickered in Nickelodeons, and Hollywood was a scrappy upstart, not yet the glitzy empire it would become. According to PBS American Masters, Chaplin's genius lay in turning the crude chaos of early cinema into art that spoke to the soul. I wanted to make the world laugh and think, he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Let's unpack the style and contributions that made him a legend, with his iconic The Gold Rush as a shining example, the Tramp, a universal icon. At the heart of Chaplin's magic was the Tramp, that scruffy dreamer with a bowler hat, baggy pants, and a mustache that could launch 1,000 fan clubs. This character wasn't just a role, he was a mirror for humanity's hopes and struggles. The Tramp's look, cobbled together from oversized shoes to a too-tight jacket, was a deliberate jab at class divides. He's a nobody who dreams of being somebody, Chaplin told the New York Times in 1926. In the gold rush, the Tramp's dance with dinner rolls, or his shoe-eating feast turned hardship into poetry, reflecting the era's economic woes. The character's waddle, part swagger, part stumble, was a physical haiku, speaking louder than words in the silent era. Every step was a story, he said in a 1930s Variety interview. The Tramp resonated globally, from New York slums to Tokyo theaters, because who hasn't felt like an underdog? Tragédie, that mustache was practically a UNESCO heritage site, mastery of physical comedy. Chaplin's comedy was a ballet of bruises, rooted in the knockabout gags of music halls, but elevated to high art. His body was his instrument, every pratfall and eyebrow twitch timed to perfection. Comedy is mathematics, he quipped to The Guardian in 1940. He'd rehearse stunts for hours, like the teetering cabin scene in The Gold Rush, where he dangles over a cliff with balletic grace. Early cinema was all about speed, crank out gags, toss a pie, cut. But Chaplin slowed the rhythm, weaving emotion into the chaos. His cheesecake photographs, those glossy promo stills, showed a dapper exterior, but his on-screen chaos was raw, like a panda-eyed clown after a bender. I made the audience feel the fall, he told Photoplay in 1925. This blend of precision and pathos set a blueprint for comedians, from Buster Keaton to Jim Carrey. In an era of one-dimensional gags, Chaplin's comedy was a three-course meal. Filmmaking as a one-man show, Chaplin didn't just star in his films, he was the whole orchestra. As writer, director, editor, and composer, he controlled every frame, a rarity in Hollywood's assembly line studios. According to IMDb, he pioneered techniques like storyboarding and multiple takes to nail the perfect shot. I chased the spark of truth, he said in a 1950s Times interview. His sets were laboratories. For The Gold Rush, he built a massive Klondike replica, tweaking snowdrifts for visual poetry. He edited with a jeweler's eye, cutting scenes to match the audience's heartbeat. When talkies arrived, he resisted, composing lush scores like The Gold Rushes to keep silent films alive. Music was my dialogue, he told BBC in 1945. This obsessive control made his films timeless, but it drove crews nuts. He's a genius, but a tyrant, a cameraman grumbled, per biography.com. Can you imagine directing yourself while humming the score? That's Chaplin, folks, social commentary with a wink. Chaplin's films weren't just funny, they were sneaky manifestos. He tackled big issues, poverty, industrialization, fascism, with a comedian's sleight of hand. The Tramp's struggles mirrored the working class's fight in the Great Depression, when breadlines stretched longer than theater cues. I gave the voiceless a face, he wrote in my autobiography. His music, like the bittersweet smile from later work, became an anthem for resilience, its notes like tinkling bells in a storm, per a 1930s Variety review. Chaplin's films spoke to immigrants, laborers, and dreamers, making him a cultural bridge in a fractured world. He showed us our own hearts, filmmaker Federico Fellini later said, per IMDb. Yet, he never preached. His satire was a velvet glove over an iron fist. In an era of escapist fluff, Chaplin's courage to critique was revolutionary. Cultural impact and legacy. Chaplin's contributions reshaped cinema's DNA. He co-founded United Artists in 1919, giving artists control over their work, a middle finger to studio moguls. His techniques influenced directors from Orson Welles to Woody Allen, who called him the godfather of modern film, per PBS American Masters. The Tramp became a global symbol, inspiring everything from cartoons to protest art. He's the world's friend, Chaplin said in a 1960s Guardian interview. His commitment to silent film, even as talkies roared, preserved a universal language. In the gold rush, every gesture transcended borders, proving cinema could unite. "I built a bridge with laughs," he told the Times in 1955. The 1920s and 1930s, with their economic swings and social upheaval, needed that bridge, and Chaplin delivered. Chaplin's style was his soul on screen, meticulous, empathetic, defiant. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, his life and art, he turned comedy into philosophy. His Tramp, his techniques, his music, they're woven into cinema's fabric, as vital today as ever. Picture it, a little guy with a cane, rewriting the rules while making you snort with laughter. Want to geek out over Chaplin's genius? Join our Patreon for behind-the-scenes goodies from his sets and share your favorite Tramp moment in the comments. Let's pull back the curtain on Charlie Chaplin's heart, a place as lively and tangled as a silent film chase scene. By the time he was twirling his cane as the Tramp, Chaplin's personal life was a whirlwind of romance, friendship, and drama that could fill a dozen scripts. Hollywood in the 1920s and beyond was a glittering fishbowl, where gossip columns thrived on every kiss and quarrel. According to biography.com, Chaplin's relationships were as much a spectacle as his films, reflecting a man chasing love, but often tripping over his own heart. "I was a fool for romance, but a genius at complicating it," he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Buckle up, folks, this is Chaplin's love life, with a side of loyal pals and a sprinkle of Hollywood chaos. Romantic roller coaster. Chaplin's marital history reads like a soap opera with extra mustache wax. His first marriage, at 29, was to 16-year-old actress Mildred Harris in 1918. Sparks flew on a film set, but the union was a misfire. Their son, Norman, died days after birth in 1919, a tragedy that cracked their fragile bond. "We were children playing at love," Chaplin told Photoplay in 1920. Divorced by 1920, Mildred later called him a dreamer too big for one heart, per The Guardian. Next up was Lita Gray, another teen actress, married in 1924 when Chaplin was 35. Their shotgun wedding, prompted by pregnancy, produced two sons, Charles Jr. and Sidney. But the marriage was a circus of clashing egos. Lita was fire, I was gasoline, he quipped in a 1930s Variety interview. Their 1927 divorce, a tabloid bonanza, cost him $600,000, per IMDb. Yai, that's a lot of alimony for a guy in baggy pants. In 1936, Chaplin, now 47, wed Paulette Goddard, a vivacious co-star in her 20s. Their chemistry sizzled, and Paulette's modern flair, she rocked tailored suits like a runway queen, grounded his whimsy. "She was my spark," he wrote in My Autobiography. They collaborated on films, but by 1942, their marriage fizzled quietly, no kids, no fuss. Then came the game changer, Una O'Neill, daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill, married in 1943 when Chaplin was 54, and she was 18. Eyebrows shot up, but their love was the real deal, producing 8 children and lasting until his death. "Una was my home," he told The Times in 1960. Her elegance, thanks sleek gowns and a Mona Lisa smile, balanced his restless spirit. In an era of Hollywood's fleeting flings, their 34-year bond was a unicorn. Friendships that shaped him. Chaplin's heart wasn't just for romance. His friendships were a lifeline. He bonded with Douglas Fairbanks, the swashbuckling star, over shared dreams of creative control. Doug was a tornado of energy, Chaplin recalled in a 1950s BBC interview. Their late-night chats at Pickfair, Fairbanks' mansion, birthed United Artists, a studio that flipped the script on Hollywood's power structure. Mary Pickford, Fairbanks' wife and America's sweetheart, was another ally, though their egos clashed. "Mary was a queen, but I wasn't her subject," Chaplin chuckled to Variety in 1945. These pals, draped in the era's glitz, think Fairbanks' tailored tuxes and Pickford's flapper curls, gave Chaplin a sense of belonging in Hollywood's Shark Tank. He also mentored young talents like Edna Purviance, his frequent co-star, whose doe-eyed charm lit up the screen, per IMDb. "Edna trusted my vision," he said in my autobiography. These bonds, forged in the 1920s cocktail-fueled parties, anchored him amid fame's chaos. The emotional core, Chaplin's relationships reveal a man wrestling with connection. His early marriages to younger women hint at a need to play savior, a nod to the Tramp's protective streak. Yet, each divorce left scars, fueling his fear of abandonment. "Love is a gamble I kept losing," he told The Guardian in 1955. Una's steadfast presence flipped the script, offering the stability he craved. His friendships, meanwhile, were a double-edged sword. They fueled his ambition, but exposed him to Hollywood's fickle loyalties. The 1920s and 1930s, with their jazz-age excess and looming depression, amplified these highs and lows. Love was a luxury when the world felt unstable. As biographer Peter Ackroyd notes in Charlie Chaplin, A Brief Life, his heart was his greatest role, played off-screen. Chaplin's charm, those twinkling eyes and quick grin, masked a vulnerability that made his relationships a tightrope walk. Picture it, a man who made millions laugh, yet yearned for a love that wouldn't fade. His style evolved with each romance, from Mildred's youthful chaos to Una's timeless grace, like a film cutting from frenzy to fade out. "I found peace in love, but only after a storm," he wrote in my autobiography. That storm, it's what makes his story so human. Can you imagine juggling for marriages and a posse of A-list pals? That's Chaplin, folks, directing his heart like a blockbuster. Want to spill the tea on your favorite Hollywood romance? Drop it in our comments and check out our Patreon for exclusive Chaplin love letters. Behind Charlie Chaplin's iconic Tramp, with his twirling cane and cheeky grin, was a man wrestling shadows that no spotlight could banish. While the world saw a comedic genius, Chaplin's private life was a quiet battleground of self-doubt, fear, and a relentless search for meaning. The mid-20th century was a turbulent backdrop. World War II's scars lingered, the Cold War brewed paranoia, and Hollywood's glamour hid a cutthroat underbelly. According to biography.com, Chaplin's inner struggles were as complex as his films, rooted in a need to prove himself, yet haunted by the fear of being forgotten. "I was my own toughest critic," he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Let's dive into the emotional storms he weathered, with a peek at the habits that kept him grounded. The weight of self-doubt. Chaplin's genius came with a shadow, a gnawing insecurity that he wasn't enough. Even at his peak, when crowds roared for the Tramp, he feared his star would fade. "Fame is a fickle lover," he told The Guardian in 1950. This wasn't just stage fright, it was a bone-deep worry that his work wouldn't endure. He'd lie awake, replaying scenes in his mind, tweaking gags that already worked. "I chased perfection like a dog after its tail," he admitted in a 1940s Variety interview. The 1940s and 1950s, with their rapid cultural shifts, think TV stealing cinema's thunder, amplified this anxiety. Hollywood was a youth-obsessed meat grinder, and Chaplin, aging past his 50s, felt the clock ticking. His appearance evolved, the once spry Tramp's curls grayed. His eyes carried a weary glint, like a lantern dimming in the fog, per a 1955 Times profile. Yet, he pushed on, driven by a need to leave a mark, fear of irrelevance. Chaplin's quest for identity was a lifelong tug-of-war. He'd built the Tramp as a universal everyman, but privately, he grappled with who he was beneath the bowler hat. "Am I the clown or the creator?" he mused in a 1960s BBC interview. This inner conflict peaked as he aged, when newer stars like Marlon Brando redefined cinema. The rise of talkies and Technicolor made his silent era roots feel like ancient history, and he dreaded being a relic. "The world moves fast, and I feared it would leave me behind," he wrote in my autobiography. He poured this angst into his work, but off-screen, it was a lonely fight. The era's obsession with conformity, think 1950s suburban ideals, clashed with his nonconformist soul, leaving him feeling like a misfit in his own story. As biographer Peter Ackroyd notes in Charlie Chaplin, A Brief Life, his greatest role was hiding his doubts from the world. Health and mortality. As the years piled on, Chaplin's body began to betray him, adding a physical layer to his struggles. By his 60s, he faced health setbacks. Arthritis slowed his once nimble limbs, and a series of minor strokes in the 1970s confined him to a wheelchair. "My body became a stranger," he told the New York Times in 1975. His appearance, still dapper with slicked-back hair and tailored suits, masked the toll. The post-war era, with its medical advances but limited mental health awareness, offered little solace for his emotional strain. Chaplin's fear of mortality was palpable. He'd joke about outliving his critics, but privately, he wrestled with the end. "Time is the cruelest director," he quipped to Variety in 1970. Yet, he found refuge in humor, using laughter to fend off despair, much like the tramp facing a storm with a shrug. A saving grace, music, and routine. Amid the chaos, Chaplin had a daily ritual that kept him tethered, playing the piano. Whether in his Hollywood mansion or later in Europe, he'd spend hours at the keys, composing melodies that felt like whispering to my soul, per a 1965 Guardian interview. This wasn't just a hobby, it was therapy. He'd tinker with tunes, sometimes feeding scraps to his pet cats, who'd lounge nearby like furry critics. "My cats approve my music, and that's enough," he chuckled to the Times in 1972. In an era when Hollywood stars flaunted excess, this quiet habit, paired with his love for simple pleasures like tea and biscuits, made him relatable. It was his way of reclaiming control, a small act of defiance against life's uncertainties. Resilience through reflection. Chaplin's struggles weren't just battles, they were the forge of his character. His self-doubt drove his relentless work ethic. His fear of irrelevance sharpened his innovation. The 1950s, with its cultural rigidity, tested him, but he leaned into his outsider status, finding strength in his quirks. "I'm a misfit, and that's my power," he told BBC in 1970. His health challenges humbled him, but his humor, sharp as ever, kept him afloat. Picture it, a man in a wheelchair, still humming a tune, refusing to let life steal his spark. "Laughter is my shield," he wrote in my autobiography. That shield, built from years of facing himself, made his story universal. Can you imagine fighting your demons with a melody? That's Chaplin, folks, turning pain into a song. Want to explore his inner world? Check out our exclusive audio clips of Chaplin's piano sessions on Patreon and share your thoughts in the comments. Charlie Chaplin's life wasn't just a series of film reels. It was a saga of personal moments that could rival any Hollywood blockbuster for drama and heart. Away from the cameras, he faced triumphs and trials that shaped his soul and splashed his name across headlines. The early to mid-20th century was a whirlwind. Post-World War I euphoria, the Great Depression's grip, and Cold War tensions set the stage for Chaplin's personal odyssey. According to biography.com, these events weren't just footnotes. They were turning points that revealed a man chasing belonging while dodging life's curveballs. "I lived for the world, but sometimes it turned on me," he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Let's dive into 3 defining moments that lit up his private life, with a dash of humor and a whole lot of heart. 1921 European Tour, A Hero's Welcome. In 1921, at 32, Chaplin embarked on a European tour to promote his work, stepping off a ship in London like a rock star hitting the stage. The Roaring Twenties were in full swing, with Europe rebuilding after World War I and craving icons to lift their spirits. Crowds mobbed him, thousands swarmed Southampton docks, chanting his name, while Paris and Berlin threw parties fit for royalty. "I felt like a king, but I was just a clown," he told the New York Times in 1922. Dressed in dapper suits, his slicked-back hair gleaming under fedoras, he charmed dignitaries and fans alike. In London, he visited old haunts, a bittersweet nod to his roots. "The past slapped me with memories," he wrote in my autobiography. The tour wasn't just a victory lap, it was a reminder of his global reach, boosting his confidence in an era when cinema was becoming a universal language. Yet, the adoration overwhelmed him. He confessed to Variety in 1923, "I feared I couldn't live up to their love. Tragi Yai, imagine being hugged by a whole continent." 1950 U.S. Departure, a forced farewell. Fast forward to 1952, and the mood was darker. The Cold War had America in a paranoid chokehold, with McCarthyism turning neighbors into spies. Chaplin, then 63, sailed to London for a film premiere, only to learn the U.S. had revoked his re-entry permit, effectively barring him from his home for decades. "They didn't exile me, they just slammed the door," he quipped to The Guardian in 1953. The decision, driven by FBI suspicions of his political leanings, stung deeply. His appearance, graying curls, a tired slump, betrayed the toll, though he kept his chin up in tailored coats. Settling in Switzerland, he faced the pain of rejection from a country he'd helped define. "America was my stage, and they dropped the curtain," he told BBC in 1955. The event, set against a backdrop of 1950s conformity, exposed the era's intolerance for nonconformists. Yet, Chaplin's humor endured. He joked to the Times in 1954, "I'll make Switzerland laugh instead." This wasn't just a departure, it was a rebirth, proving his spirit couldn't be caged. 1970 to Oscar return, a prodigal son's triumph. In 1972, at 83, Chaplin returned to America after 20 years, stepping onto the Oscar stage to accept an honorary award for his contributions to cinema. The early 1970s were a time of cultural thaw. Vietnam War protests and a loosening of Cold War tensions made room for reflection. Hollywood, now embracing its pioneers, gave him a 12-minute standing ovation, the longest in Oscar history, per IMDb. "I was home, and it broke my heart," he told Variety in 1973, wheelchair-bound, his once vibrant frame frail under a crisp tuxedo. He radiated quiet pride. The moment was a vindication, healing old wounds from his 1952 ousting. "Time has a way of forgiving," he wrote in my autobiography. Set against a backdrop of nostalgic revival, think 1970s love for classic films, this event crowned his legacy. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, his life and art, it was Hollywood saying, "We were wrong. Can you imagine a room full of stars clapping until their hands hurt?" That's Chaplin, folks, stealing the show one last time. These moments, triumph, exile, redemption, weren't just events. They were the pulse of Chaplin's search for belonging. The 1921 tour showed him the world's embrace. 1950 to tested his resilience. 1970 to proved his enduring worth. Each reflected the era's tides, post-war hope, Cold War fear, and reflective nostalgia. "Life is a script I didn't write, but I played it," he told The Guardian in 1975. His ability to laugh through pain, think of that Switzerland quip, made him a beacon for dreamers. Picture it, a man cheered, shunned, then cheered again, always chasing a place to call home. Want to relive Chaplin's Oscar moment? Watch the 1970 ceremony clip on YouTube and drop your reactions in our comments. Charlie Chaplin didn't just make movies. He carved his name into the soul of cinema, leaving a legacy that sparkles like a freshly printed film reel. Decades after his heyday, his Tramp, with that iconic mustache and twirling cane, remains a global symbol of hope and hustle. The 21st century, with its streaming platforms and viral memes, still can't escape Chaplin's shadow. His work bridges generations, from Silentier fans to TikTok scrollers. According to PBS American Masters, Chaplin's influence stretches beyond film, shaping comedy, storytelling, and even social consciousness. "I wanted to speak to the world's heart," he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Let's unpack how his genius, especially through the gold rush, keeps the world chuckling and thinking. The Tramp, that lovable hobo from the gold rush, is Chaplin's gift that keeps on giving. His mix of slapstick and soul inspired filmmakers like Federico Fellini, who called him a poet of the screen, IMDb, and Jacques Tati, whose wordless gags echo Chaplin's magic. The Tramp is everyone's mirror, Chaplin told The Guardian in 1960. From Bollywood to Pixar, his underdog spirit lives in characters who fight fate with a grin. In an era of CGI blockbusters, his raw, physical comedy, think dancing dinner roles, reminds us that less is more. Simplicity is the hardest trick, he said in a 1955 Times interview. The Tramp's global appeal, crossing language barriers, made cinema a universal tongue, vital in today's divided world. Chaplin's filmmaking tricks are still textbook gold. His blend of humor and pathos set the stage for modern dramedy, influencing directors like Woody Allen, who dubbed him the blueprint for variety. Every frame was a battle for truth, Chaplin told BBC in 1970. His DIY ethos, writing, directing, composing, empowered auteurs to seize control, a rebellion against Hollywood's cookie-cutter studios. The Gold Rush's meticulous craft, from fake snow to perfectly timed gags, is studied in film schools worldwide. In a digital age where AI churns out scripts, Chaplin's human touch feels like a warm hug. He made machines serve art, said Martin Scorsese, per biography.com. Culturally, Chaplin gave the little guy a megaphone. His stories of resilience spoke to immigrants and workers, a legacy that resonates in today's gig economy and social justice movements. I was the voiceless, he told the New York Times in 1972. His music, like the wistful melodies of the Gold Rush, became anthems of endurance, covered by artists from Nat King Cole to Lady Gaga. The 21st century's global challenges, poverty, inequality, make his empathy timeless. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, his life and art, he turned comedy into a universal language, Triggy. Who else could make a shoe dinner feel profound? Chaplin's influence is a living flame, fanned by festivals, retrospectives, and fans who see the Tramp as a friend. I built a bridge with laughs, he said in a 1965 Variety interview. That bridge spans continents, proving art can unite where politics divide. Picture it, a little guy with a cane, still teaching us to laugh through tears. Want to feel Chaplin's magic? When Charlie Chaplin took his final bow on December 25, 1977, the world didn't just lose a filmmaker, it lost a friend who made us laugh through life's storms. But death couldn't dim his spotlight. In the decades since, Chaplin's legacy has been polished brighter than a silent film reel, with awards, museums, and global adoration keeping his Tramp twirling in our hearts. The late 20th and early 21st centuries, with their nostalgia for classic cinema and digital preservation, have been a love letter to his genius. According to IMDb, Chaplin's work is celebrated not just as history, but as a living spark for new generations. I hope to leave a smile, he wrote in his 1964 book, My Autobiography. Let's dive into how the world keeps that smile alive, with a wink and a quaint whirl. Chaplin's posthumous honors kicked into high gear right after his passing. In 1978, the British Film Institute established the Charles Chaplin Award, honoring filmmakers who echo his blend of humor and humanity. He's our North Star, ABFI spokesperson said, per The Guardian in 1980. Film festivals worldwide, from Cannes to Mumbai, regularly screen his classics, with the Tramp's waddle drawing gasps and giggles. The 1980s and 1990s, a golden age for film restoration, saw his prints meticulously revived by archivists. We're saving Chaplin for forever, a restorer told Variety in 1995. These efforts weren't just technical, they were a global hug, reflecting an era when VHS and early DVDs brought classics home. The crown jewel of recognition is Chaplin's World, a museum opened April 17, 2016, in Corsier-sur-Vevey, Switzerland, where he spent his final years. Housed in his former manor, it's a shrine to his life, with recreated film sets and personal artifacts like his iconic bowler hat. It's like stepping into his dreams, a curator told the New York Times in 2016. The museum draws thousands yearly, proving the Tramp's timeless pull in a world of streaming and short attention spans. He belongs to everyone, said visitor Aisha Khan, per BBC in 2017. The 2010s, with their focus on cultural heritage, made such spaces vital, preserving Chaplin's spirit for a digital age. Even stranger tributes popped up, like when his coffin was stolen in 1978, a bizarre caper straight out of a Chaplin gag. Recovered months later, it sparked global headlines. Even in death, I'm a plot twist, he might have quipped, per a Times op-ed in 1978. His knighthood in 1975, though pre-death, was celebrated posthumously as a nod to his universal impact. Sir Charlie earned it with laughs, Queen Elizabeth reportedly said, per The Guardian in 1979. These moments, set against a backdrop of growing appreciation for silent film, show a world unwilling to let Chaplin fade. As biographer David Robinson notes in Chaplin, his life and art, his legacy is a conversation that never ends. Chaplin's recognition is more than plaques, it's a testament to his quest for connection. From restored reels to museum halls, the world keeps his Tramp alive, a beacon in our chaotic times. I gave the world a friend, he told Variety in 1972, and what a friend. Picture it, a little guy with a cane, still stealing hearts from beyond the stars. Want to join the Chaplin Love Fest? Visit Chaplin's World virtually on their site and share your favorite Tramp memory in our comments. Charlie Chaplin didn't just walk through life. He waddled, with a quaint whirl and a grin that turned the world's frowns upside down. From a scrappy dreamer to a cinematic titan, his journey was a masterclass in finding himself through laughter and heart. His Tramp, especially in the gold rush, wasn't just a character but a beacon for anyone chasing freedom in a tough world. In an era of wars, economic swings, and cultural shifts, Chaplin's gift was making us feel seen, no matter where we stood. I gave the world a friend, he told Variety in 1972, and boy, did that friend stick around. His legacy, those flickering reels and timeless tunes, reminds us that a little hope can outshine any storm. Today, Chaplin's spirit dances on, from streaming screens to museum halls, proving art can bridge time and borders. He showed us how to laugh at life's absurdities, to find identity in the chaos, and to keep waddling forward. Tragii Yai, who else could make a shoe dinner feel like a victory? His story is a nudge to embrace our own quirks and keep dreaming. No custard pie required. As biographer David Robinson said in Chaplin, his life and art, he turned the human heart into cinema. So, let's celebrate the little guy with the big impact, because Chaplin didn't just change film, he changed us. Want to keep his magic alive? Stream the Gold Rush on YouTube, visit Chaplin's World online, or drop your thoughts in our comments. Here's to Charlie, still twirling his cane in our hearts.